Matthew 5 is where we continue. That pizza is off the chain good, isn't it? That's some good tasting stuff. Oh, it's good. Yeah, that's good. Matthew chapter 5 is where we are. We have been studying the Beatitudes. We're not going to do a lot of recap and review this evening. We're approaching the end. But we have been going through Matthew chapter 5, beginning our study on the Sermon on the Mount. And of course, the Sermon on the Mount begins with this section called the Beatitude. Now, who can tell me what the word Beatitude means? Blessed, absolutely. And so that's why this section has the name, because here Jesus is saying, blessed are X, Y, and Z. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are they that mourn. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Blessed are the merciful. Blessed are the pure in heart. And tonight we are picking up in verse 9, blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. Now, as we've been going through our study, we have seen that there are many different ways in which one can understand these Beatitudes. There are many different ways in which we can apply these things to our life. The angle that I've been looking at them from in our study is we've been looking at the Beatitudes as virtues, as Christian virtues, as things which we can develop and cultivate in our lives to live a virtuous, blessed life. And in living that way, we can find true blessedness. We can find true happiness as we glorify God, cultivating these Christian virtues in our life. And so we've examined all of these so far from that perspective, and we will continue that trend this evening. But of course, as I say, there are other ways we can look at it. What's another theme that's popped out just before we get started? We've seen many themes here. What's one that stands out to you as we've been studying the Beatitudes? What are some of your takeaways so far?
Everybody.
Everyone's chowing down on foods. That's why I asked the question. I had to give myself a chance to eat some pizza.
We related it to the fruit of the Spirit last week.
Okay, yeah. Mr. Charlie told me some about that. And these things are very closely connected to the fruit of the Spirit, right? There is some overlap. If you were to think of this as like circles, it's like a Venn diagram, where there's a portion where some of these things overlap with one another. Some of them are a little different on this side and a little different on this side. But yeah, we can think of a lot of these as fruits, the fruits of Christian maturity. The difference between like a fruit and a virtue would be that fruit is a thing that is just naturally there. It naturally grows. It's naturally produced in your life by virtue of being a Christian. Whereas when we talk about it from the perspective of virtues, we're talking about things that we develop. We become pure in heart by behaving in a way that is pure of heart. We become mournful by behaving in a way that is mournful. So we develop and grow these things. I hope you can kind of discern the difference there. But that does not mean that those things are in competition, because a lot of this, it's both and. A lot of these are both fruits and virtues. If these are marks of Christian maturity, only Christians are going to really be able to develop these things in their lives. And they, of course, can be cultivated and increased or decreased in our life according to the way that we live. So yes, they're closely related to the fruits of the Spirit in that sense. Anyone else have any takeaways from our time in this study? I think this is our 7th lesson in the Beatitudes, 8th if you count last week.
Well, once you become born again, the fruit is there. The attitude that your fruit produces these attitudes.
Mm-hmm.
are these virtues. And the closer you become with Jesus, the more these become relevant in your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. A couple of things that have stood out to me as well as we go through this. There's the idea of the upside down kingdom. So Jesus presents these things as blessed or happy. Happy is the one. And then he gives like these negative circumstances. Happy are those who mourn. Happy are those who are poor in spirit. Happy are the meek. You see, you could substitute the word happy for blessed. It really means the same thing. Happy are the merciful. And so in the eyes of the world, those things are not necessarily things that would make one happy. It would be more like happy are the proud, happy are the rejoicing, happy are the strong, happy are those who are full and satisfied, happy are those who execute justice or whatever. And on it goes. But according to Jesus, the one who is blessed, the one who is happy, is the reverse. I've talked about it as the upside down kingdom. Another thing that stood out to me as we've been going through this study is the fact that all of these things, they are relevant both in time and in eternity, but especially in eternity. They are relevant. They do have their benefits in this life and in this world, and that is certain, but most of these have to do with the next life. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven, not only now, but in eternity. Blessed are they who mourn, for they shall be comforted, not only in this life, but ultimately in the presence of Christ, when every tear is wiped away, and all our pain and sickness and death is gone. We will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the earth, not only in time, but when the new heavens and the new earth are ushered in, it will be the meek who inherit all of that, and so on and so forth. So the blessedness that Jesus is pointing us to is not necessarily happiness or blessedness in this life only, while that is there for sure. We don't want to overlook that. But the happiness and the blessedness that he's pointing to is in the age to come, even more so. And those are just a few things that have stood out to me. But today we go to verse 9. So verse 9 says this: Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. So, what is a peacemaker? This is a good place to start. What does it mean to be a peacemaker? The word peacemaker, it is an adjective. So, it's not a noun, or it's not a thing. It's not an action necessarily. When you look at the grammar of the whole thing, this word is an adjective, which means it's a descriptor. It's describing, it's telling a quality about somebody. Blessed is the one who is a peacemaker. Blessed is the one who makes peace. It's a compound word. It comes from the word irene, which means peace, and poioi, which means to make. So the word is ireno poioi in Greek, and that means to make peace. It's just literally a peacemaker. So what is a peacemaker? I have a few ideas of this, and then you can tell me what you think. A peacemaker is one who will go to great lengths to establish a peaceable solution in the middle of a conflict. So a peacemaker is somebody who will labor to resolve a conflict in a peaceable way. A peacemaker is one who is careful to make peace before conflict even arises. A peacemaker will make themselves busy preventing conflict from coming up in the first place in order to keep the peace. And finally, I wrote, a peacemaker is one who makes every effort, as much as it is dependent upon them, to live at peace with all men. I think that is ultimately how I would define a peacemaker. A peacemaker is one who makes every effort, as much as it depends on them, to live at peace with all men. What do y'all think? Do you guys like those definitions? Do you have something to add to it?
I like the last one.
My Bible here has little footnotes, and it says, God is the supreme peacemaker, and his sons follow his example.
Very good. Absolutely. Absolutely. How is it that God is the supreme peacemaker?
God. He doesn't have any faults. He knows how
God
to.
is love.
Yeah, he knows how to peacemake.
Yeah, knows how to make peace.
Yes.
Moms are peacemakers.
Moms are peacemakers, yeah.
We have peace through Christ.
Yeah,
You know, we have that, since Christ died, and he died for our sin, so we can have peace with God the Father.
yeah,
Our sins are no more.
yeah. God made peace with us by giving his son. Absolutely. Yeah, God is the ultimate peacemaker. He's the perfect one. Every offense, every violation was against him. He is guiltless. We are guilty. Yet we see the ultimate supreme peacemaker taking the initiative to make peace with fallen and rebellious human beings by sacrificially giving his own son. That's a peacemaker, for sure. For sure.
He stopped the war between man and God.
Yeah.
He, just like when the angels came down to proclaim Jesus' birth, they said, peace on earth, goodwill toward.
Yeah.
Jesus died and buried, rose again. The war's over. I mean, he paid the price. His judgment. He took all the judgment of us on to him, so we can go free and have that peace on earth.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes, we see this in Christ. And of course, we've seen all of these Beatitudes really in Christ. All of these things are fulfilled perfectly in the life of Christ. Christ is the ultimate one who is poor in spirit, the ultimate mourner, the most meek, the one who hungers and thirsts for righteousness. And yes, Christ is the peacemaker. All of these things find their fulfillment in him perfectly. That's absolutely true. Amen. Anybody else? Well, as we've been talking about these virtues, we've been talking about them in terms of, okay, well, what does this mean? And then, as with all virtues, virtue lives in the middle. So you can go to an extreme on one side, and now you've fallen into vice. And you can go to an extreme on the other side, where you also fall into vice. Virtue is like walking on that narrow bridge, where on either side you fall off a cliff. We want to walk right down the middle. We want to stay right on the bridge. And so, in light of that, I thought about some of the excesses and deficiencies or lacks of being a peacemaker. So, what is the excess of peacemaking? Excessive peacemaking, which is a vice, it is not a virtue. To be excessively a peacemaker is essentially to be a pushover. Just to be a pushover. And just a few examples. So, think of like the mom, we're talking about moms who are peacemakers. Think about the mom who just doesn't want conflict with their kids, so they just give the kid whatever they want. Oh, you want to eat brownies at bedtime? I want to keep the peace. I don't want any conflict, so fine, you can have the brownies at bedtime. Oh, you want to run around and scream and hit me in the face? I really don't want, I want to keep the peace. I don't want any conflict, so, whatever, honey, just do whatever you want. That's called being a pushover. That's not being a peacemaker. That's excessive peacemaking, and it is a vice. It is bad for the kid. It's bad to let kids just run and reign and act crazy like that. That's not a good thing. And that is an excess of peacemaking. Here's another example. A husband who is a pushover with his wife. A husband who just lets his wife trounce him and run all over him and basically rule the roost, if you will. That is excessive peacemaking. A man who does not take authority in his home and lead his family is not a peacemaker. He is a pushover. And that is not virtuous.
Sometimes it's smart, though.
Sometimes it's easier. It's always easier. It's always easier. But that doesn't make it virtuous. In fact, because being virtuous oftentimes is very difficult. It's hard to be virtuous. It's hard to walk the road that we're supposed to walk. It's hard to live the way that we're called to live. But these are both examples. And both of those examples are examples where we're not actually helping the situation. Like, as a husband, we're not helping our wives if we just let our wives, like, be the leaders in the home. That's not beneficial to them. That's actually really bad for them because women weren't made to do that.
Au contraire.
Um,
I knew you were fixing to get it.
You can say it, that's fine. But the reality is that was not what women are created to do and not created to carry that burden.
In which generation?
In
Maybe
every,
back when the Bible was being written, but not anymore.
well, in every generation, I would say. Yeah. I would say it's just part of our human DNA. It just kind of is what it is. So.
I think we should vote 50-50.
That's the only reason we're still together is 50-50.
Well,
That's how I think.
60-40.
Well, okay,
60-40.
60-40.
I'll throw one in there, who's my leader?
That's what I wanna know, who mine.
I know who my
yeah,
leader
you
is.
got the Lord. There you go.
Yeah, 'cause
I don't have a middleman.
Yeah.
Correct.
At any rate, it's bad for the other party to do that. But there's another example of this as well. Imagine being like a girlfriend or even a wife who you have a husband or a boyfriend who is like violent and angry and is just basically abusive. And to be excessively peaceable in that situation is like walking around on eggshells, doing everything you can not to set that person off because, they'll go crazy or whatever. That is not being a peacemaker either, and that's actually bad for you. When you're the one who's in that situation, that's horrendous for you. That's really bad and dangerous position for you to be in. And so we see that going to this excess of peacemaking is bad for everybody because it's not walking in the lane of where we want to be. But there is also a lack of peacemaking, or a deficiency of peacemaking. And that would be the attitude of just, it's my way or the highway, right? Someone who is lacking in this virtue of peacemaking is somebody who is stubborn and just obstinate. Basically, they're going to get their way no matter what. It doesn't matter. Like, that's the opposite. That's a deficiency. That's a lack of peacemaking. And so both of those extremes are not good. We want to be in the middle, living in the middle there as peacemakers. Any thoughts on that?
Quit. Quit.
No, we shall not say.
We might have to have one of those question and answer things.
Yeah, listen, you're more than free to disagree with me. I don't care if you disagree with me. That does not bother me at all. So, yeah. Hot take of the night.
Well, there's always divorce. You ever been divorced?
Never been divorced.
You gotta try it sometime.
I don't think so.
It'll awaken your eyes.
Yeah, I don't think I'm going to try that. Not interested in that.
Well, it's better than the alternative.
Yeah, it's better than living in an abusive relationship, and it's better than
But you
living
gotta
with
say
a.
sometime.
Get shot.
There you go.
We had a
Yeah.
sermon on Sunday about this, about women who had to lead in the home because the man didn't. And until that time, we have one pastor down there in Logan, and her husband was the pastor before her. But she believes that, in the home, that the man should lead. However, she says many times the men don't lead, and therefore the woman has to take that role until he leads. That's what she said. She said that Sunday.
Yeah, it's not whether but which. Somebody's going to lead.
Someone's going to lead.
Someone's going to. It's true.
Some people don't duck quick enough.
There you go. So that's being too much of a peacemaker and too little of a peacemaker. On one hand, we can be pushovers and just get trampled on, which is not really being a peacemaker.
That's being a doormat.
That's being a doormat, and that's not virtuous. And on the other hand, we can be stubborn and obstinate and just, it's my way or the highway. It's going to be what I say or it's going to be no way at all. And neither one of those are virtuous. We want to be people who make every effort, as much as it depends on us, to live at peace with all people. That's the road we want to walk on. So what is the opposite of being a peacemaker? The opposite of being a peacemaker is being quarrelsome. Being a troublemaker, yeah. Always finding fault, always picking fights. The example that comes to mind with this is siblings. Think about how siblings interact with one another, especially in their youth. Think about all the fault finding and the nitpicking and all of the things that goes into sibling relationships, especially when we're young. I don't know about you, but this was true for me, and it's definitely true for many of my kids as well, the way they interact with each other. Contentious and quarrelsome. Always picking, always finding faults.
That's me.
That's you?
Because the first thing anybody asks me, I say no.
Yeah?
And nothing else, but I tell them no. I don't care what they ask of me. She said, all you ever do is say no. Get it out and open.
Right. Just a good starting place.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's a good starting place, yeah.
You don't know my family. Ask for her uncle. It's gonna be his way or forget it.
Yeah.
He was born on Christmas, so therefore he thinks he's, he gets everything. I swear he does. And he's the one I have to live next to.
Ah.
When and if I ever get somebody can read my plat and help me mark it off, because he's trying to take part of mine. So it's like, I haven't been around for 20 years because of that. It's like, nope, And I was told that I could come back as long as I didn't start no arguments. I ain't starting no argument. I went and paid my taxes and I got a copy of my plat. All right, here you go. I'm doing it nice and legal, but I haven't said nothing to him. Ain't bothered him. Taking my time.
Well, that's actually a really good example, because an important part of the definition that we've talked about is as much as it depends on you. And we'll get into this here in a moment, but the reality is that peace is not always an option. Peace is not always possible. Because it really, in order to have peace in a relationship with another person, it really takes both of you. And if one of you just will not have peace, there will not be peace. You think about the issue of Israel and Gaza. People say, well, we want peace with Israel and Gaza. You know why that's not going to happen? Because Gaza doesn't want peace. Israel really doesn't want peace either, probably. Neither one of them want peace, but definitely Gaza doesn't want peace. And it doesn't matter how many deals, how many options, how many offers are made, there will not be peace, because the only way to have peace is if both people desire it. So part of what it means to be a peacemaker is to do everything in your own power to live peaceably, knowing that we can't control other people. All we can do is control what we do. So that's a really good example. That's what we deal with, right? We deal with that in families, with relationships in husband and wife, with our kids. We deal with that in the church. We deal with that in communities. Everywhere where there's relationships between more than one human being, you're going to have to work through this issue of how can we have peace.
It'll eventually be peace, but there won't be nothing left. It'll be to the ground, both in Ukraine and Gaza.
Yeah.
There'll be nowhere to live.
But why did they blame us? We ain't even over there.
Yeah. Well,
Sending bullets.
a lot of that, it depends. What do you mean when you say, why do they blame us? What do you mean?
Well, right off the bat, they're saying the U.S. is back in Jerusalem. Yeah, look who attacked Jerusalem.
Uh-huh.
So, and all the protesting going on.
Yeah, so the thing about the protesters, and we actually talked about this like right after this happened. You may remember or you may not if you were here. But right after the whole Israel thing, we talked about Israel and Gaza and the woke and the culture of death. And we talked about why it is that on these college campuses and in the news in the Western world and in America, we see people reacting to this the way that they are and saying the things they're saying. And it's for a very different reason than the reason why the Gazans hate Israel. The Gazans hate Israel because they are Islamic, and like it's part of their religion to like kill Jews and Christians. That's just part of their religion. So they hate Jews and they want to kill them because they believe that's their mandate from God. The people who are on these universities and on the news cameras and all this stuff, they hate America and the Jews for a different reason. The reason why they hate America is because of their woke ideology. Their ideology that says that the United States is a colonizing nation, it's full of white supremacy, and they are oppressors, basically. And so those people want to see the destruction of the United States and Israel because they see them as oppressors and colonizers, while the Gazans want to destroy Israel particularly because they see them as Jews and as it being their responsibility to kill them. And my argument is underneath all of that is the same spirit of death, that spirit of hatred and a spirit of death, and that is really behind both of those different worldviews. But that's how those two things connect together. That's my take on it anyway. I don't know if that answers the question you were asking or not.
What do you think if somebody would want to make peace?
Yeah.
Out of all the death and everything, somebody would want to stop.
Yeah, you would think. But that's the thing, is peace actually is quite difficult to come by. In many relationships, especially when you're talking about like geopolitics, because that's in a whole different level of things anyway. Just a few summarizing thoughts that I have about what it is to be a peacemaker here. So I think that the virtue of being a peacemaker is especially natural for the Christian. I think that this comes naturally. It's one of the fruits, you could say. This is like a fruit of being a Christian in a sense, because we have been peaceably reconciled to God through His Son, Jesus Christ. Not only so, but we are called to be peaceably reconciled to one another. Scripture tells us all over the place to live at peace with one another, to forgive one another, to extend kindness and love and all of that to one another. We are called to live at peace with one another. We are called to live at peace with all people. And peace is one of the fruits of the Spirit. So love, joy, peace is one of the fruits of the Spirit. This is a natural part of what it is to be a Christian. As Christians, we desire to live at peace with all people. We are called even as ambassadors of God to men, calling people, begging people to be reconciled to Him. So we have been reconciled to God by the peace that was provided through Jesus Christ, and we are called to tell other people how they can be reconciled to God because of the peace that was provided in Jesus Christ. Any thoughts about that aspect of being a peacemaker? That's basically what it means to be a peacemaker from my point of view here. Any other thoughts about that? Well, what is the blessedness of being a peacemaker? Blessed are the peacemakers. Why? They shall be called the children of God. Now, it is true, the only reason that we can be considered children of God is because Jesus Christ has made peace for us. You remember the Lord speaking to the religious leaders, He says that they are children of the devil. Those unbelieving religious leaders, they are children of Satan. They are not children of God. In 1 John, the book we've been studying on Sunday morning, just a couple weeks ago, we talked about the difference between the children of God and the children of Satan. You see, our default position is as children of Satan. It is only through the work of Jesus Christ that we become children of God. So the only way for us to be considered the children of God is because Christ has made peace between us. Now, for the most part, children do what they see their parents doing. That's not always true, but for the most part, generally speaking, monkey see, monkey do. Children do what they see their parents doing. So as believers, when we see our Father in heaven making peace, Well, we're going to be like him. We're going to do what he does. Like Jesus said, I do what I see the Father doing. So as the children of God, we do what our parents, we do what our Father does. We make peace. God is making peace with rebellious men, and we as his children are called to make peace in this world, the same type of peace that he made with us. So we're called to be peacemakers. We're called to live at peace with all men. We will be revealed as children of God. You could think of it this way. To the degree that we live at peace in our lives, reveals that we are the children of God. So if you have someone who walks around talking about how they're a child of God, yet they have no peace in any of their relationships, that's probably a red flag. When you are constantly at odds with everybody, at odds with our spouse, at odds with our children, at odds with the people in the church, at odds with people in the community, at odds when we go to work, everywhere we go, we're at odds with everybody. That probably does not say a lot about us being children of God in a positive way, right? But when we look at our lives and we see that we have peaceable lives in the home, peaceable lives at work, peaceable lives in church, peaceable lives in the community, that is an indication of the fact that we are, in fact, children of God. So the only other thing I say about this is that notice that it's a future blessing. They shall be called the children of God. Now it does reveal in time, once again, that we are the children of God. When we live at peace with all men, we are showing that we are the children of God, but we shall, in the future, be called the children of God. So this is something that we see not only that has blessing in this life, but ultimately and perfectly in eternity. Not only in time, but also in eternity. We will be called the children of God. We will be adopted as heirs and co-heirs with Christ, living at peace with all people in a world of no sin, no death, no sickness. Hey, there won't even be any marriage, so we won't have to fuss about this question of who's to lead the home, right? We won't even have to worry about that because people won't even be married in heaven either. There's only one king in heaven, and his name is Jesus, and he's leading everything. Hallelujah. So we will live at peace with all men in that time. Any other thoughts about that? What it means to be a peacemaker, what it means to be a child of God.
I'm ready to go to heaven.
She said, I'm ready
A lot
for
better than down here.
I'm ready for that peace right now. She said, I'm ready for that resurrected body right now.
I'm telling you. But like I said, that's fine. I ain't confronted him. I ain't done nothing. I'll wait till God gets there with him.
Well, that's very good. Let's turn together to Romans chapter 12 because that's very true. This is good. And I think that our sister is expressing something that we all have going on to one degree or another in our lives. We all have, since we live in a broken and fallen world, that means we have broken and fallen relationships. Sometimes it's our fault. Sometimes it's someone else's fault. Sometimes it's both of us together. Most of the time it's both of us together. In fact, pretty much all of the time. Not all of the time, but most of the time. And this leads us to the next part. So if being a peacemaker is a virtue, and we can cultivate virtues, that means we can cultivate being a peacemaker in our life. We can become better at being a peacemaker. We can live more peaceably in our life and in our relationships. So let's talk about how we do that. Now we're going to read a few verses here from Romans chapter 3, or Romans chapter 12 rather, and we're going to see what we can learn from them. Will someone read verse 3 of Romans chapter 12?
For by the grace given me, I say to every one of you, do not think of yourself more highly than you ought, but rather think of yourself with sober judgment in accordance with the faith God has distributed to each of you.
Okay, so this is very important when it comes to peacemaking. The first rule of peacemaking is do not think higher of yourself than you ought to. Now that doesn't mean that you should think less of yourself than you ought to. But what does he say? Think of yourself with sober judgment. We should have the right view of ourselves. That doesn't mean we shouldn't think higher of ourselves than we ought to, which is the temptation for most of us. But we also shouldn't think lower of ourselves than we ought to. But we should think about ourselves soberly or appropriately, right? We should think about ourselves in the way that God sees us, essentially. We should kind of know our role, if you will. We shouldn't be up or down, just be what we ought to be. Let's read verse 10.
Be kindly affectionate to one another with brotherly love and honor, giving preference to one another.
The second step to living peaceably with all men is being kindly affectionate, being merciful, being loving, preferring others above yourself, giving honor to others, letting people cut in front of you in line. Just let that happen. Give them the honor. There's no reason to quarrel about your spot in the line. Just give honor. Prefer others above yourself. Prefer the wants and needs and desires of others above your own wants and needs and desires. Now, what will that do to our marriage relationships? What will that do with our relationships with our kids? What does that do in our relationships in the church and at work and everywhere we go? If we begin to say, you know what, it's really not about me and what I want and what I feel like I need, but I'm going to give place to you. I'm going to consider your needs and your desires and your wants, and I'm just going to give honor to you and prefer you over and above myself. Second step of peacemaking. In honor, preferring one another, one over the other. Let's read verse 14.
Bless those who persecute you. Bless and do not curse.
Okay, so here's a tough one. Here's a tough one. We want to live at peace with all men. We want to live peaceably. We want to be peacemakers. That means when people curse us, we don't return cursing for cursing, but rather we return cursing with blessing. Bless those who curse you, and do not curse them back.
I go along with Proverbs where it says, do good things to those who fight you, keeps cold.
Yeah. Yeah,
That's, I'm paraphrasing.
yeah, that old saying, killing them with kindness. You know, there was a scene in The Chosen, I forget which season, I think it was season 4, this most recent one, where it was the scene where Jesus is telling them, you know, if someone compels you to walk 1 mile, go with them 2. And so it showed a scene here in the show where the Roman soldiers came and they basically got Jesus and all his disciples and they loaded their baggage and all their equipment on them and they made them walk 1 mile with them. It was a law. They could do that, but they could only go 1 mile. And they had like pillars and posts marked on the side of the road so you knew how far you were going. And in that scene, all the disciples are all mad. If they knew who Jesus was, they wouldn't be doing this kind of a thing. They're highly upset about the situation for obvious reasons. But Jesus, once they get to the mile marker, and all the Romans are like, all right, give us back our stuff, Jesus just keeps on walking. He says, no, we'll go 2. We'll go an extra mile. We'll take it to the second one. And everyone was confused. The disciples, the soldiers, everyone was like, what is going on here? But Jesus said, no, we're going to go. We're going to keep going. You're not making us do it. We want to do it. So they kept going. And as they were going, you could see the expressions of the soldiers begin to change. They started to feel that conviction of, man, we were being real jerks. So, man, let me get that pack. Like, I'll hold this pack here. Give me that piece of armor. I'll carry that. You don't have to carry that. And by the time they got to the end, basically the soldiers had taken all their stuff back. They felt bad. They felt like jerks for mistreating these people. But that was because the way that he responded to it. When they cursed him, when they said, come with me for a mile, he returned their curse with the blessing. I'll go 2. And that made peace out of the whole situation. It brought conviction to the soldiers, and that's how Jesus made peace in that situation. He didn't pull out a sword and start fighting. He said, you know what, I'll honor you. I'll prefer you against me. I'll return your curse with a blessing. I'm not going to think of myself higher than I ought to, but I'm going to consider myself your servant. This is the way that we make peace. Let's read verses 17 through 21.
Pay no one evil for evil. Have regard for good things in the sight of all men. If it is possible, as much as depends on you, live peaceably with all men. Beloved, do not average yourself, but rather give place to wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, said the Lord. Therefore, if your enemy is hungry, feed him. If he is thirsty, give him a drink. For in so doing, you will heap coals of fire on his head. Do not be overcome by evil, but overcome evil with good.
All right, so there's a lot going on in here. First of all, this is kind of a repeat of verse 14. Do not repay evil for evil. This is a huge part of being a peacemaker. We cannot repay evil for evil. Don't repay a harsh word with a harsh word. Don't repay a nasty look with a nasty look. Don't repay evil for evil. We're talking about how we can become peacemakers. Provide what is honest in the sight of all men. And this is where, so verse 18 is where I pulled and put this in the definition. This is an essential part of our definition. What does it mean to be a peacemaker? If it be possible. If it be possible. Peace is not always possible. As much as it depends on you, you do everything you can do to live at peace with all people. To live peaceably. He says, do not avenge yourself, but rather give place unto wrath. For it is written, vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord. And this is what our sister was just talking about a moment ago. We don't take vengeance into our own hands. We're not going to do that. If we're going to be peacemakers, that means we can't give people their comeuppance. We should just wait on God to do that. He's a lot better at it than we are anyway. And He'll really give it to someone better than you can. So just let Him do it. Give place to Him. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. I will repay.
Or He'll save them, and it'll be even better.
And that's even better. Do not avenge yourself, but give place to wrath. This is what we tell our kids all the time. They'll get to fighting, they'll get to bickering, and they'll get to like smacking each other and hitting each other. And then they want to come and cry about all the smacking and the hitting. It's like, listen, you messed up. You messed up. You're out of order now. I don't care about your smacking and your hurting because you didn't come to me first. You tried to take care of things yourself, and then you got smacked for your trouble. If you would have come to me first, I could have dealt with it. But you didn't come to me. Come to your Father. Let Him deal with it. Vengeance is His. He will repay. Is that true or is that not true? That's pretty true, yeah. Come to the Father. Let Him take vengeance. And this is what Brother Charlie said just a moment ago. If your enemy is hungry, if your enemy is thirsty, give him food, give him drink. Bless your enemies. Bless those who persecute you. Bless those who despitefully use you. Don't repay evil for evil, hatred for hatred. If your enemy is hungry, feed them. If they're thirsty, give them a drink. For in so doing, you heap coals of fire on his head. And then finally in verse 21, it summarizes it all. Do not be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. You want to be a peacemaker? Have the proper view of yourself. First of all, don't think too highly of yourself. Don't think too lowly of yourself either, because that's also disorder.
He was quoting Proverbs 25, 21, 22. Man was there because it says, if thine enemy be hungry, give him bread to eat, and if he be thirsty, give him water to drink. For thou shalt heap coals of fire upon his head, and the Lord shall renew thee.
There you go. Pulling from the Proverbs, a little divine wisdom there from Solomon, from Paul, from God for us today. That's right. So think properly of ourselves. Be kindly affectionate toward one another. Prefer one another, honoring others over and above yourself. Bless those who persecute you. Treat people who treat you wrong. Treat them well. Treat them the way you would like to be treated. Do not repay evil for evil. And as much as you can, do everything you can, as far as it is possible, to live at peace with all men. Do not try to take vengeance into your own hands, but give place to wrath. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Feed your enemies. Do bless your enemies. And all of this can be summed up in do not be overcome with evil, but overcome evil with good. That's how we can live as peacemakers. So if I was to boil this down to just a few steps, how do we cultivate being a peacemaker? As much as it depends on you, remember that peace is not always possible. You do what you can do. I had a football coach who used to say, the only things in this life that you can control are your effort and your attitude. That's always stuck with me. I can't control what the ref's doing. I can't control what the other team's doing. I can't control the weather. I can't control the crowds. I can't control. The only thing I can control is my effort and my attitude. We must be willing to suffer injustice and not return evil for evil, but evil with good. You want to be a peacemaker? You better get comfortable suffering injustice.
As my Sunday school class knows, I'll always say, God is an attitude changer. He'll change your attitude. And that should be your attitude.
There you go. Absolutely. We must not only be comfortable and willing to suffer injustice, but we must be comfortable knowing that things will very seldom go the way that we want them to go. Very seldom are things going to go exactly the way I want them to. As much as I would like them to go exactly my way and control every aspect of it, very, very seldom does that actually happen. And we just got to be comfortable with that. If you can't be comfortable in a world where you're not controlling every piece on the puzzle, you will never be able to be a peacemaker. What was that?
Never be happy.
Never be happy, that's for sure. So how can we do this? We can, first of all, practice resolving conflict in our own homes. That's the easiest place to start. Let's resolve conflict in our own life, in our own home, even within ourselves to some degree. And then we can also practice resolving conflict with those who are in our immediate influence. You got two friends who are fighting, try to be a peacemaker. Try to bring them together. You got family members who are fighting, try to be a peacemaker. Try to bring them together. You got co-workers who are bickering and arguing, try to be a peacemaker. Try to bring them together. Practice being a peacemaker. Practice making peace. And that's how we can do all that. Any final thoughts as we come to a close? That's all I got here. Well, congratulations.
Romans 12 is one of my favorites.
Yeah. Mine too.
One of my favorite scriptures. Yeah. Romans 1 says, I beseech you, therefore, brethren, by the mercies of God, that you present yourselves, your bodies, a living sacrifice, wholly acceptable unto God, which is your reasonable service. The only thing about living sacrifices, they always won't crawl off the altar.
That's right. That's right.
We gotta get ourselves. And the second verse in that, it says, and be not conformed to this world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is good, acceptable, and perfect will of God.
It says changing the way you think.
Yeah. Don't be.
And I just really like that because, you know, sometimes I know that I'm probably off in the way my attitude is, and I have to pray, God, change the way I think to line up with the way you think. Because there's things that I'm
Not
not.
my will, but thy will.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't even know what those things are.
I know. That's why we need to be studying the word to find out that thing.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, Romans 12 is good. Awesome. Well, if there's nothing else, Brother Charlie, will you close us in prayer this evening?